Welcome to the Thaddeus Stevens Museum. Thaddeus Stevens at your service today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was the most powerful congressman during and after the Civil War. I helped to persuade Abraham Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. I was instrumental in the passage of the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, as shown in your movie Lincoln, where I was ably portrayed by Tommy Lee Jones, but I did not have a Texas drawl. I am the father of the 14th Amendment, the single most important amendment to the Constitution, requiring equal treatment under the law and also extending civil liberties to the state level. I spearheaded the impeachment of Andrew Johnson, and I was one of the architects of Reconstruction. Some people call me the greatest unknown person in American history, or the 17th and a half president. With that said, let's go into my museum. This is a print of me made in 1898 in recognition of my other title of Savior of Public Education in Pennsylvania for a speech I made in the state legislature in 1835, which turned back a repeal effort of public education. Public education had been passed the year before in 1834, and of course that meant more taxes, which inspired a taxpayer revolt in Pennsylvania. And the legislature would have repealed public education, except for a speech I made where I urged legislators to build not your monuments of brass and marble, but of ever-living mine. I particularly like this print because it has this caption, "Fearless Champion of Freedom for the Oppressed," which is the motto of the Thaddeus Stevens Society, which was formed in 1999. Now, on the back of some prints is this information about how the print came about, and also biographical information about myself, such as being the greatest parliamentarian in U.S. history. I lived in Gettysburg from 1816 to 1842, and then I moved over to Lancaster, where I lived the rest of my life until 1868. This is my house in Gettysburg. Unfortunately, it was torn down in 1924. However, a blue cast iron sign is in front of the place where my house was. Gettysburg College was established in Gettysburg in 1832 in a building provided by the borough. In 1833, they wanted to get a building of their own, so they applied to the legislature to get $18,000. And they were promptly turned down by the legislature because representatives from this area were not into education. They felt like you did not need an education to pull a plow. In 1834, I came to represent Gettysburg in the legislature, and I was able to get the $18,000 for their first building, which is Pennsylvania Hall, which still stands in the middle of the campus. However, there was a political firestorm because of that. And at that time, I said that in matters like this, I'd rather hear one judicious voice than all the huzzas of the uneducated, which set the tone for the rest of my life. I was going to do what was right, not what was popular. Then the college could not find anybody to sell them land. So they came back to me, since I was the largest property owner in Gettysburg, and asked me to provide land to them. And I provided initial 6 acres to them at a price set by the trustees. Now this map shows the various parcels that I sold them. The yellow was the first one, the green was the second one, and the blue was the third. And they also put me on their board, which I served for the rest of my life until 1868. Now, in 1854, the college was actually thinking about leaving Gettysburg, and I felt that was outrageous after all that we've done for the college. So I came back from Lancaster, and I basically browbeat the Board of Trustees into agreeing to stay here forever. And it still is there. And they put up a building to me in 1868, in the last year of my life, Stevens Hall. However, their dedication to me has waned over the years, and in 2015 they put up a statue in front of Stevens Hall of Abraham Lincoln. I was the largest property owner in Gettysburg, and this is an actual deed that for land that I bought in 1825 from the estate of James Geddes, the founder of Gettysburg. And I sold that property in 1848. Above that is a copy of a deed for property that I bought in Fairfield, Pennsylvania. These are letters that I wrote, and you know that they're letters that I wrote because you can't read them. I had absolutely horrible handwriting. Fortunately, there is a person in the Thaddeus Stevens Society who can decipher them, and there are translations below them. Now, the first letter, the blue letter, was a letter I wrote in 1851 to Edward McPherson in Gettysburg, offering him the position of editor of my newspaper in Lancaster. Now, Edward McPherson was the son of a business partner of mine. He grew up under my shadow, and I was like a second father to him. And Edward McPherson would go on to play a pivotal role on December 4th, 1865, or what I call the day that I and Edward McPherson saved the country. And what happened was that Lincoln, our Senate president, was assassinated in April of 1865. In his accidency, Andrew Johnson became president. And when Lincoln asked me about the wisdom of making Johnson his running mate, I told him directly that Johnson was a rank demagogue and a scoundrel to boot. He went ahead anyway and appointed him. So Johnson, who was a Southern Democrat, started issuing pardons wholesale to all of the ex-Confederates. And he allowed them to hold elections. And they, not unsurprisingly, elected Confederate officials. And they planned on taking over Congress with the aid of their Northern Democratic allies. And one of the things they were going to do was to allow the reinstatement of slavery in the South. And that was going to be done through laws passed by the southern states called black codes, which only applied to blacks. And it said if you're black and you do not have a job, you are a vagrant and can be put back onto the plantation as convict labor. But as the master of the House of Representatives, I was not going to allow the Southerners to take over Congress. And I came up with a plan that involved Edward McPherson, who by this time was the clerk of the House of Representatives, a position that I secured for him. And like every other session of Congress, the clerk, Edward McPherson, started to call off the roll of the members of Congress. And he got to the Southern names and he skipped them, didn't call them out. The Southerners and their Northern allies jumped up and down and said, "You can't do that, you can't do that." I got up and I said, "Point of order, we can conduct no business until the roll is finished." The roll is finished, giving the Republicans a supermajority in the House of Representatives to block Andrew Johnson from losing the Civil War after the Civil War. Without that particular parliamentary maneuver, you would not have had the 14th Amendment. You wouldn't have had the 15th Amendment giving black men the vote, and you wouldn't have had the military occupation of the South during Reconstruction. It was as if we came to a fork in the road. If Andrew Johnson had had his way, we would have gone back to the way things were before the Civil War. But because we went in the other fork, we went in the direction of our modern society with its rights protected. So, the next letter, next to that, is an 1838 letter that concerned an event that did not turn out very well for me. This is a letter to a political colleague about the election in Pennsylvania of 1838, which became the Buckshot War. And in that case, what happened was it was uncertain who won that election, and both sides set up competing houses in the house, in the legislature in Harrisburg. And the Democrats solved the problem by importing a mob from Philadelphia and taking over Harrisburg by force. And I had to jump out a window at one point to get away from a rampaging mob. Unfortunately, as I was jumping out, I also lost my wig at that time, but I was able to recover it. So, on a more mundane level, we also have a note from me canceling a subscription in Gettysburg. We have a charging sheet where I charged somebody with stealing 15 bushels of corn valued at 25 cents. We have the report of the investigation on the Buckshot War. And we have a ledger by a person with much better handwriting than me who bought supplies for my Caledonia iron mill. In my museum, we have stoves that were made at my two iron mills. This first stove was made at my Mariah furnace, which was out in Fairfield, Pennsylvania. And I owned that from 1828 to 1837. Now, the iron stack, where the iron actually was made, still exists out there, but is covered up with vegetation, and the farmer who owns the property does not work with the society to clear it off or put up signage. However, in 2009, the society did a field trip and discovered this chunk of iron around the iron furnace stack. We believe it might have been a ornamental fence post. Now, I did move over to Caledonia iron mill in 1837, which I owned until my death in 1868. That iron furnace is now a state park called Caledonia State Park. Both of these are known as 10-plate stoves because they're made out of 10 plates. And you would put your wood in here, you do your baking in here, and you do your frying on top. Now, if you go to Caledonia State Park, you can still find around that area a remnant of my ironworks, which is slag, which is the byproduct of iron making. And we weren't too careful about where we threw it. We threw it in the streams and around the area, and you might still find it somewhere. In fact, you might even find something that is nice and shiny like that. Now, the iron business was the worst mistake in my life. I continuously lost money operating iron mills. In fact, I left Gettysburg in 1842 and moved over to Lancaster to make more money to pay down the debt. Some of my friends had urged me to declare bankruptcy, but I said, I may use the bankruptcy laws in the next life, but in this life, I'm going to pay back every penny. So I continued to lose money in the 1840s and the 1850s. In fact, I called my iron mill my sinking fund. But I started making a little bit of money in the 1860s because of the war. But that was put to an end in 1863 when Confederate General Jubal Early, on his way to the Battle of Gettysburg, made a special stop at my Caledonia iron mill and burnt the place to the ground. At the time, my faithful foreman, John Sweeney, told Jubal Early that we were not making any money there, that we were just keeping it open for the sake of the workers. And Jubal Early cynically replied, "Yankees don't do business that way." He also said that if he had caught me there, he would have hanged me on the spot and distributed my bones to the Confederate States as souvenirs. When I heard about the burning, I said, "Did they burn the debts also?" And I said, even though it cost me $75,000, which was the largest civilian financial loss of the Gettysburg campaign, I considered it a cheap price to pay if it meant the elimination of slavery throughout our country. I was not just a national figure, I was an international figure. And this is a French publication which has an article about me pursuing the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. It included a picture of me being carried in to pursue that impeachment. And I'm being carried in because in the last few years of my life, I was slowly dying, and that is how I had to get in on some occasions. But I kept my sense of humor, and one time I'm being carried in by these big, strong guys, and I look down at them and I say, "What am I going to do when you're dead and gone?" So, this is another picture of me as one of the managers of the impeachment, and I'm the person with the cane. And if you look closely, you'll see that my left foot is a club foot, which particularly bedeviled me when I was younger because it was seen at that time as a mark of the devil. Now, this is a picture of me coming in under my own steam to the impeachment. And over here on the wall, we have a picture of me presenting the impeachment charges along with John Bingham, another member of the House of Representatives. And over here we have a copy of Harper's Weekly showing the impeachment managers with me in the middle. And below that is a picture of me giving the summation of the impeachment. Now, Andrew Johnson was acquitted by one vote in the Senate. And I made the prediction before the acquittal that if we could not remove Andrew Johnson under these circumstances, since we had barred the Southerners from Congress, that probably the only way that a president would be able to be removed in the future was the way that they removed Julius Caesar. Now, we have here a pass that I signed a month before I died into the gallery at the House of Representatives. This is a replica of a ticket into the impeachment itself. Now, one of the great artifacts that they have here at the museum is this book, which is a collection of eulogies about me that were read in the House of Representatives. And this book particularly was very important because it also has an inscription inside saying, "This book is a present from the Honorable John A. Bingham of Cadiz, Ohio." John Bingham was the person who presented the impeachment charges along with me. He was also a manager of the impeachment, and he also was one of the main framers, along with myself, of the 14th Amendment. In fact, the Thaddeus Stevens Society calls me and John Bingham the co-fathers of the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment was my greatest achievement and my greatest disappointment. If they had followed my original proposal, women would have gotten the vote 50 years before they did. And that was because I wanted to change representation to determine how many congressmen states got and also how many electoral votes they got from whole numbers of people, including people who couldn't vote, to the number of actual eligible voters. If they had taken that route, then smaller states could have simply doubled their representation in both Congress and the Electoral College by giving women the vote. And of course, larger states would have had to follow suit, otherwise they would lose their representation. However, that was way too radical for the Congress at the time, and they went in the opposite direction and actually inserted into the 14th Amendment the word male as a prerequisite for voting. I was outraged by that, and I said I could not understand it because all of the bachelors, like myself, were against putting male in there. It was just the married guys that wanted to put male in there. And so I wondered, what problem did they have with women? So even though I threatened to vote against my own amendment for that and other reasons, I came around and said this was the best we could get. And I said at the time, believing then that this is the best proposition that can be made effectual, I accept it. I shall not be driven by clamor or denunciation to throw away a great good because it is not perfect. I will take all I can get in the cause of humanity and leave it to be perfected by better men in better times. And maybe that time will not come while I'm here to enjoy the glorious triumph. But that it will come is as certain as that there is a just God. This is our research area for scholars who come here to study about my life. And we have many books about Reconstruction and about the Civil War. We also have all 14 biographies of myself, which of course pales next to the thousands of biographies about Abraham Lincoln. As I like to say to people, that the Union had two great political geniuses during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, of course, and myself, and much of the genius of Abraham Lincoln was that he listened to me. So we have all these biographies, and one of the oldest is an 1876 biography that was written by a person who hated me. And he also hated short titles. And this is the title from this book written by Alexander Harris, which is A Review of the Political Conflict in America from the Commencement of the Anti-Slavery Agitation to the Close of Southern Reconstruction, comprising also a resume of the career of Thaddeus Stevens, being a survey of the struggle of parties which destroyed the Republic and virtually monarchized its government. Then there's a Latin phrase, quando imperium tenet pravi plutro populus. When the government is held by the wicked, the people cry. Now, Alexander Harris actually lived in Lancaster at the same time as I did. And one day he was walking down a narrow sidewalk, and I was walking towards him. And he scowled at me and he says, "I never stand aside for a skunk." And I stepped off the curb and I said, "But I always do." Now, we come to this display case, which has a book called The Klansman, which was put out in 1905 by Thomas Dixon. Right? This book was later made into the infamous movie Birth of a Nation. And we have here, the book is opened up to a picture of, or a caricature of me next to Lincoln, which has me saying, "The South has conquered soil. I mean to blot it from the map." Now in this book, I was the villain, and the heroes are the Ku Klux Klan, which come riding to the rescue of a town being taken over by a black mob. Now, below that is a booklet about the effort to create a statue of me and two governors in recognition of the creation of one of the first public school systems in the country. Now, this was a picture of a model of that monument, and they actually were able to get the legislature to appropriate $100,000, but then the governor at the time vetoed it with the lame excuse that not enough money had been appropriated for public education that year. Therefore, he was vetoing the money for a memorial. Now, one of the other things they have here in this display case is a button that was put out as part of the campaign to have that memorial, which included a very small picture of the memorial on the button. Now, the case also includes documents concerning the creation of the Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. In my will, I was going to leave $50,000 to my drunken nephew, but only if he gave up liquor, which he did not. So instead, the money went to the founding of school, which is now the Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology in Lancaster. And it is one of the best two-year technical schools in the country. And once you graduate from there, you don't go looking for jobs, jobs come looking for you. And I was very specific about how it was to be run. I said that it had to be open to all races and creeds, and that they all had to be served at the same table. So this is a picture of me laying in state in the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C., an honor only given to Henry Clay and Abraham Lincoln before me. This is a picture of me, or my funeral in Lancaster, which was attended by 20,000 people, half of them black. Now, I insisted on being buried in the only integrated cemetery in Lancaster, and this is a picture of my monument there. And this is a rubbing of my epitaph, which talks about why I am buried there. And it says, "I repose in this quiet and secluded spot, not from any natural preference for solitude, but finding other cemeteries limited as to race by charter rules. I have chosen this, that I might illustrate in my death the principles which I advocated through a long life, equality of man before his creator." When I died, my fame rivaled that of Lincoln, and the New York Tribune, a leading newspaper of the day, edited by Horace Greeley, devoted the entire front page to my death. And also, this Philadelphia newspaper also devoted their entire front page to my death. Harper's Weekly, perhaps the leading magazine at that time, featured me laying in state on their front cover, as well as Frank Leslie's Illustrated newspaper, their competitor. Now, a year before my death, this picture was widely circulated. And Frederick Douglass, who was an admirer of mine, said that he had a picture of me in his house, and perhaps he had a picture like this. Now, it continued on even after my death, and the Pullman car company did name a Pullman car after me, and we have a model of that Pullman car here with my name on it. You may be wondering why I am not more famous, and one of the reasons is because I was target of what is known as the lost cause mythology, where the Southerners after the Civil War went back and rewrote the history of the Civil War and said it wasn't about slavery, it was about states' rights, that slavery was benign, and then they started putting up statues of their heroes throughout the country. And they also made me a target of their wrath. Now, I've been in 3 movies, 2 as a villain and 1 as a hero. And the first movie I was in was the 1915 silent film, Birth of a Nation, which was the most advanced film of its day, having close-ups, rapid cutting, tracking shots. It also has retained the title of being the most racist film ever made. And in that movie, which was based on that book I showed you earlier in the video, The Klansman, in that movie I am the villain, and the heroes again are the Ku Klux Klan, which come riding to the rescue of a town being taken over by a black mob. That movie accomplished two things. It revived the Ku Klux Klan to become a huge national organization. And you can still see film clips of thousands of hooded Ku Klux Klansmen parading through Washington, D.C. during the 1920s. That movie did that. It also revived a racist slur against me and my biracial housekeeper. During my lifetime, I was accused of only being for equality because I was getting the favors of my biracial housekeeper. I denied that, and my housekeeper, a devout Roman Catholic, particularly denied that. In fact, she confronted an editor and threatened to cowhide him if he continued to print such articles. That accusation faded away after my death and was not included in early biographies of me. But this movie revived that and has a scene where I am getting very romantic with my housekeeper, and a title comes up saying, "A great man's weakness is the blight of a nation." After that movie, biographers have felt compelled to address the issue, and most of them have said that there's no evidence of a romantic relationship. However, some have used questionable evidence to say that there might have been. Now, the second movie I'm in is Tennessee Johnson, a 1942 film about Andrew Johnson, the 17th president. And in that one, he is the hero, and I am the villain because I tried to remove him. At one point in the movie, and the Andrew Johnson character accuses the Thaddeus Stevens character of trying to enslave white Southerners. Now, I was played by Lionel Barrymore in that movie, who is the grand uncle of your current actor, Drew Barrymore, and he also played Mr. Potter in the movie It's a Wonderful Life that starred Jimmy Stewart. Now, finally, there's a movie where I'm a hero, which is Lincoln movie. And my fan club, the Thaddeus Stevens Society, was so excited about that they actually came up with their own poster of me as an action hero. And the reason that I'm in the movie is because Tony Kushner, the person who wrote the screenplay, was a big fan of mine, and he put me into the movie. And my fan club president, Ross Hetrick, was able to catch up with him and get him to sign that. And you have at the bottom here, "For Ross, thanks for keeping the great commoner alive, Tony Kushner." And this is a picture of Tony Kushner signing the poster with Ross Hetrick over there. Now, Tommy Lee Jones was nominated for Best Supporting Actor Academy Award, but he lost out primarily because he's not well liked in Hollywood. He's kind of a curmudgeon, which people say made him a perfect pick to play me. Okay, the last stop is our gift shop, where we have things for every Thaddeus Stevens fan, starting with a replica of the statue in front of the courthouse here in Gettysburg. We have a comic book about Thaddeus Stevens here. We have biographies of Thaddeus Stevens. This is the most recent, came out in 2021. We have bookmarks for only $1 each, and we have postcards for various things, such as his grave and his house over in Lancaster. We also have our ever popular joke book, which includes many witticisms from myself. And we have t-shirts showing my smiling face here. And we also have mugs. And we also have music that was made for me in the 1850s and also in 1944. So you have a variety of different things, and we do take credit cards. So come down and take the tour, which is free. And we also take donations, and you can also support us by buying one of the souvenirs that we have here for Thaddeus Stevens.